Helps to unmute myself. Thank you, David. Thank you to everybody who decided to join us today. We know you have many choices in this world of virtualness. And so we're delighted you came to be here with us. So last week, I put it in last week's newsletter, but I wanted to announce this morning the 2021 charity that those who were in attendance last week picked during Sunday service. 40 people cast their vote, and more than half chose Old Pueblo Community Services. So I called all three of the charities this week to let them know the decision the congregation had made and to thank them for the empowering work that they do in our community. And Susan from Literacy Connects was so sweet. She said again how much she was delighted to participate with us and how she was excited and nervous that she and Literacy Connects were going to be on Cynthia James's podcast recording later this month, which will give their charity greater visibility outside of Tucson and potentially greater support. We also put a link in this past week's newsletter for Home Office. Centers for Spiritual Living is looking for charities for Home Office or all of us together to support in 2021. And the deadline for that is the 15th. So if you have a charity, one that we looked at, or perhaps another one that you think is worthy of Centers for Spiritual Living supporting, go back in the newsletter and look at that form. It's not bad for filling it out and recommending a charity. And maybe we can have two different charities supported in Tucson next year. That would be awesome. So each of these representatives from these charities that we heard from and the ones that will be chosen by Home Office, each of them have a vision for a greater yet to be. It's a world that we don't have an experience of yet, but it's one that's possible if we can imagine it, if we can vision it. Which brings me to today's question. How can we imagine a greater, more beneficial and supportive reality than we're presently aware of? When the band was getting their sound check done before, we were talking about this not really being January of 2021, but some kind of bizarre 13th month from 2020. It's like, no, we need to, it was a joke, right? And we need to rearrange our thinking to think forward, to think into this vision that we wish to have of the year that we are walking into. And this typically is the Sunday of the year that we vision collectively for CSLT for this year that we're in now, in preparation for the Community Envisioning Weekend, the 22nd and 23rd of this month. And we'll still practice that spiritual practice this morning, but because of virtual participation, and I couldn't figure out how to do it on Zoom, and the recognition of the outpicturing that we all had with our ears and our eyes and our hearts this week on the stage in our capital, we need to, well, I'll change it. I'll change that. We have an opportunity to outpicture a different reality than what we saw this past week. So I'm going to suggest that perhaps that might be something that's worth envisioning or imagining or seeing a more positive and more beneficial reality than what we saw plastered all over media this last week. We will vision for CSLT during our community envisioning practice the weekend of the 22nd and 23rd, and I invite you to participate with us if you're interested in and if you're able. And there will be more about this in the newsletter in the next week or two. So we all have experienced a tumultuous week from several different angles. And it's a little hard to get our bearings sometimes and imagine future possibilities when it feels like our basic safety and security feels a little unstable, uneasy, or threatened. Unfortunately, this is not a new experience. From Dr. Holmes' radio program, This Thing Called Life, August 6th, 1950, he offered a prayer for our country. And before I read you the prayer, I want to talk about the state of the world in 1950. I wasn't born yet, so I don't know from personal experience. But I do know that World War II had ended in 1945, but the world as they experienced it was far from stable because all the countries were realigning and sides were still being taken. And some countries were gaining freedom and others were losing it. And we had a very unstable peace situation with the Soviet Union. The Cold War, ultimately with the Soviet Union, had already begun to show up with the Korean War, which was beginning. So, what did Holmes say in this prayer? It's going to sound very old fashioned to our ears and very US centric, because remember, we're talking 70 years ago. It was a different world then. And yet, I think there's value to be gained in imagining and envisioning and seeing a world of bigger possibility. So I'll read what he wrote. Believing in the divine destiny of the United States of America and in the preservation of liberty, security, and self expression for all, I offer this, my prayer for my country. I know that divine intelligence governs the destiny of the United States of America, directing the thought and the activity of all who guide its affairs. I know that success, prosperity, and happiness are the gifts of freedom and are the divine heritage of everyone in this country. I know that success, prosperity, and happiness are now operating in the affairs of every individual in this country. I know that divine guidance enlightens the collective mind of the people in this country, causing it to know that economic security may come to all without the loss of either personal freedom or individual self expression. I know that no one can believe or be led to believe that freedom must be surrendered in order to ensure economic security for all. The all knowing mind contains the answer to every problem which confronts this country. I know that every leader in this country is now directed by this all knowing mind and has the knowledge of a complete solution to every problem. Each is compelled to act upon this knowledge to the end that abundance, security, and peace shall come to all. And I know this spiritual democracy shall endure, guaranteeing to everyone in this country personal liberty, happiness, and self expression. He certainly wasn't speaking about the US as he had experienced it. He spoke about his whole and holy vision of what it could be if indeed we all tapped into this divine all-knowing mind and allowed that greater presence to inform our individual and collective decisions. 70 years later, we're still not there. So is this just pie in the sky? Or is there some spiritual practice that we can see in his words and we can take and apply to our lives right now, right here? So I want to remind you of the process that Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith and his leadership team used to create and establish the center that came to be known as Agape International. Beckwith and his leaders visioned what Agape would become for 2 full years before they opened the doors in 1986. He not only He's not only the leader to create the spiritual community called Agape through the practice of visioning, he's just the most famous to do that because he wrote this book called Life Visioning and taught thousands and thousands of individuals to use this technique to catch a bigger idea about their life purpose. What can I do with what I have and what's available to me? So, what's the key to this process of visioning? You're not going to like it. It's allowing and letting. Holmes wrote it this way in The Science of Mind on page 489, paragraph 3. Now you are ready to prove your principle by allowing this life to flow through the thing you are working on or for. Do not will or try to compel things to happen. It's like he understood human nature, right? Things happen by an immutable law, and you do not need to energize the essence of being. It's already big with power. All you need to do is realize this fact, and then let it be done unto you, and unto that for which you are working. Let, L-E-T, capitalized, is a big word and an important one. By taking thought, you do not add to reality, but you allow or let reality manifest in the things you're doing. There's a reason we offer an 8-week class in visioning. It takes some practice to learn to let go of the notion that we know exactly the best way to orchestrate something. It also takes some practice in learning to hear, learning to listen to that still small voice that often speaks in ways our logical mind doesn't know what to do with it. A visioning practice seldom, truthfully, it never happens, seldom gives us a list of tasks or activities to do. Normally, listening to divine mind speak looks a lot more like dream work than it looks like brainstorming. Except we've opened our minds up looking for specific guidance for a specific question. And since mind seldom speaks in complete sentences or paragraphs with correct spelling and punctuation, we often just get impressions or ideas or images, things that normally arise as feelings or sensory experiences or smells or tastes. These don't translate well to our compartmentalized logical brains. So we're going to do a visioning practice today, right now, actually. So grab a piece of paper and something to write with. You're not going to share this with anybody else, but please write it down. It matters for you that you see what comes to you in the visioning practice. I'm going to give you a couple of choices, and you don't have to pick either of them. If you feel disturbed or distressed or unnerved or unsettled by the events that are happening in the US at the moment, you can vision on that. If you want to vision on something going on in your life or something you desire to create in your life, or something that's going on in the life of a family member or a friend, you can vision on that. What we're doing is a practice to open our consciousness up to see a bigger possibility, to get a greater yet to be, the pet phrase that likes to be used. So I'm going to set this up. I'm going to set up the visioning practice with an affirmative prayer, and then I'll get to the questions. Just so you know, the questions are, what's the highest vision, highest ideal for this topic, for my topic? And the second question looks a lot like, what changes as this vision comes to pass? The third question, which I don't always use, but I'm going to use today, what's mine to do? And if you start making a list of tasks, stop, because that's your logical mind coming in and wanting to make order. Ask the question in your mind and see what happens. It may be the answer to what's mine to do may be to look up to smile, to feel hopeful, to feel positive. Don't look for a list of chores. Look for something that's more embodied. Because really, that's the tasks come, they do. But look for a way of being, how your being is changed. So maybe the question should be, what's mine to be? And just let that sit and see what ideas come up in your mind. And if someone pops up in your mind, a picture of their face or a word, write that down. There may be some connection that needs to be made. And then the fourth question, is there anything else that wants to be known? It's always useful to say, hey, have I missed something? And sometimes, because this is a practice, you won't get anything at all. And that's perfectly okay. The practice is about listening and allowing. So here's the challenge. For situations where we're deeply invested in a particular outcome, it's hard to listen because it's hard to let go of our certainty that we know exactly how it's supposed to turn out. And to do this practice well, to learn something that is available to mind that's not available to us right this minute, we have to let go of what we're sure of. And that's hard. And it's necessary because otherwise we can't see what's possible. So then after we finish the visioning practice, I'll finish the prayer. And normally in a group practice like this, we would share our results. But this time, because people will be visioning on different things, that won't exactly work. So if you want to hang out after the service for a minute or two or five and talk about what you got, we can do that. And if you want to call a friend who's here today or not and talk about what you experienced during the visioning practice sometime during the week, please do that. So we're going to enter into this visioning practice now. So grab your paper and your pencil or pen or whatever and get still and situated and centered. Take a breath and walk with me into the space of divine mind, this whole and holy presence that knows all things, that is motivated and empowered by love and works by means of the law of cause and effect, knowing that cause and effect are simply two sides of the same coin, and cause is always mental. So opening my awareness to the presence of this divine wholeness, this divine joy and love and light and power and passion and generosity. And breathing into that, I see how it shows up as me. And I recognize that it also shows up as each beloved on this call. So I open to a grander experience of these divine qualities. And I know that no matter how big my imagination gets, no matter how open my intuition gets to receive the impress of these imaginations, there's always room for more. So I breathe again and I allow this divine mind, this eternal, powerful presence to present more of this life than I know right now. And I move this conversation into the practice of visioning. And I ask the first question. And I ask that each one on the call write down whatever they get It might be a vision, it might be a sound, it might be a smell, it might be a scene, it might be a song, it might be a texture, it might be a face. Whatever it is, there are no wrong answers. But listen and allow and write down whatever comes. So I ask the first question: what's the highest vision, highest ideal for this topic on my heart? What's it look like, taste like, sound like, feel like? What's the highest vision, highest ideal for the topic on my heart today? And I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute to write down whatever it is that shows up. So please write it down. So I take a breath and I regather myself from wherever I have been. And I open my mind again to this greater vision, this greater possibility. And I ask the second question: what changes, evolves, becomes, shifts, adjusts, adapts, moves in, moves out, releases, embraces? What changes as this vision comes to pass? What changes as this vision comes to pass? Whatever you get, write it down. So I regather myself back to this space and time, and I reconsider, I re engage with this whole and holy presence. And I ask the third question: what's mine to do? What's mine to do? What's mine to be? Who am I to become? Whatever you get, write it down. So I take a breath and I regather myself from wherever I went off to. And I open my awareness again, one last time, to this divine presence and power. And I ask the fourth question: is there anything else that wants to be known, realized, or understood? Is there anything else that wants to be captured in this moment? Is there anything else? So I take a breath and I regather myself to finish this prayer. I feel grateful for this opportunity to practice this spiritual practice that's enlarging and enlivening and causes a little more of divine mind to be embodied by each and every individual who engages in this practice every single time. So I celebrate this opportunity to share this practice and to do this practice together because I know each and all benefit from doing so. So I bless this, I bless this practice, I bless this gathering, I bless each and every idea that landed from divine mind onto paper. And I know that more will be revealed as these images and ideas become present, become moved into form. So I feel so grateful for this letting, for this allowing, and for this way to be together in mind. Knowing the words as true, I let them be, and so it is.
Yes.
So before I close, I want to say something about visioning. You don't have to like what you wrote down. Just saying. Back before I moved to Tucson, I was visioning for the house I was going to move into because I knew I was moving to Tucson, but I didn't know what it looked like. And so I visioned for several days, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks on the same topic. And, it was cool. It was very happy, nice stuff. And it was exciting. And then one day it has wheels. And I didn't like that. And so I argued with spirit that I didn't think that my house should have wheels. And so when I moved into a park model several months later, I realized it does indeed have wheels. So we get what we get and we take it and we work with it. And so if you captured something down on your paper that you don't like, it's really okay. It doesn't necessarily mean exactly what you think it does. Just just be with it. It's a practice. And the other thing I want to say before I close is to really get good data, I put quotes around that, in this practice, visioning multiple days in a row on the same topic and then compiling the information is when we really learn the message, because seldom is anybody a clear enough channel to get it entirely in one sitting. So anyway, that's my introduction to visioning, and I want to close with a little tiny snippet from Emerson's essay, one of Emerson's essays, called The Oversoul. It's on page 190 for those of you who are taking roots. Within each human is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. This deep power in which we exist and whose goodness is accessible to us is not only self sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the things seen are one. We see the world piece by piece, as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole, of which these are shining parts, is the soul. Only by falling back on our better thoughts, by yielding to the spirit of prophecy, which is innate in everyone, can we know wisdom. And then I want to use a very short poem by Daniel Ladinsky in the style of Hafiz. This one is called You Say, I Say. You say, how can I find God? I say, the friend is the lining of your pocket, the curved pink wall in your belly. Sober up, steady your aim, reach in. Turn the universe and the beautiful rascal inside out. You say, that sounds preposterous. I really don't believe God is in there. I say, well then, why not try the Himalayas? You could get naked and pretend to be an exalted yogi and eat bark and snow for 40 years. And you might think, hey, old man, why don't you go shovel snowflakes? So this practicing, our logical mind doesn't know what to do with it because it doesn't fit. And yet each one of us knows we have an intuitive sense. We know we have access to this thing called intuition. We have to be willing and brave enough to visit it, to see what it has to tell us. So explore your intuition, explore your imagination, and accept it as a source of information for your life, because it is. Do that, bless yourself, and bless us all. Thank you. So now I want to roll on into the prayer, which is affirmative, because that's how we pray around here. So I know this one mind, this presence, this power lives, moves, and has its being as each and every one of us. Each individual is already that an emanation of that divine presence as them. And so I open to a greater idea, a bigger picture of possibility for myself and for each and all, knowing that each one has that intuitive ability to see more and be more. And me too. Each one lives within this mind and can express more as they choose. So I reach in and express out. And I see that same possibility for and about each individual. Each and all can express more of mind. And the world benefits when we do that. We experience, we gain, and so does everyone else by this collective sharing of higher consciousness. So I celebrate this knowing, I celebrate this opportunity to practice together and to be more and more that whole and holy presence that benefits the entire planet. I feel so grateful to be able to be part of this practice today and to be part of the spiritual community. I know each being as divine and magnificent, and I celebrate that awareness. Relaxing into this great good, which is always expanding, I let it be, and so it is.
Yes.